Good morning and welcome to Global View. I am Olamide Martins. In our reports this morning, Israeli tanks are attempting to advance farther west in their war against Hamas around Khan Yunis, the biggest city in the southern Gaza Strip, while United Nations officials appeal for a truce to prevent a humanitarian disaster. And Russians who are barred from flying abroad must surrender their passports to authorities within 5 days of being told to do so, and that takes effect from today. Well, Argentinian libertarian economist Javier Milei assumed office, warning in his first speech that the country's worst economic crisis in decades, with inflation approaching 200%, requires a sudden, severe fiscal shock. Well, more details and developments to come. To stay with us.
Of overwhelming voices where everyone has different opinion on different issues. It is important that we bring the core issue to the fore. Join me, Nancy Banigo, on Softline as we lend our voices to inform and influence your thoughts and actions. This is not just mere talk, it is an invocative program that touches the core of our existence.
Hello and thank you for joining me. I am Olamide Martins. This is Global View. With the latest reports from the African continent, Asia, Europe, Australia, the Middle East, the Americas, sports and entertainment are not left out. With correspondents bringing you up to date with developing stories, exploring all views, making sure all voices are heard. Join me every weekday at 10 a.m. on Global View. Catch all our programs live on our website at abn.ng/live or on StarTime channel 140. We begin at COP28, where on Saturday hundreds of protesters gathered in the United Arab Emirates in a rare outburst of freedom of expression, using the platform of the United Nations Climate Summit to highlight human rights violations and the conflict in Gaza. Well, this took place despite rigorous United Nations guidelines on signs and languages. Olamide Martins joins us this morning from COP28. Olamide is the Programs Manager at Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. Welcome, Olamide, to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so we do understand there was a protest on Saturday. What was the response to that protest against the human rights violations in Gaza?
I think the protest was a demonstration of displayer that did not just start here. It's an accumulated displayer. And then it was a strong statement that was made that cut across lines and boundaries. So in that protest, you see people from the global south in solidarity, and I mean strong solidarity with Gaza and Palestine, because I believe is that there is no climate justice when human rights are being infringed upon. So it's like a protest that cuts across boundaries, and the statement is clear: to give justice to those that deserve it and freedom to those who are being marginalized by political powers and structures that be.
Okay, so still talking about protests, there was also another protest against false climate change solutions at the ongoing United Nations Conference on Climate Change. Could you elaborate what that was all about?
Okay, it's almost like an annual ritual where you have, projections being made that are strongly not in line with the expectations of the people, particularly those of us from the global south and Africa. You see very strongly a convention that is advancing, fossil fuel expansion and carbon market mechanism. And that is not what we want as Africa. And so when we hear them gather to do this, it is only natural for us to protest and to remind them of the realities that we've seen very strongly at the frontline community. So that is just normal. It's what we have been doing. It's so unfortunate that is the language that they understand. And we always tell them, because we will not stand here or see them watch and make conclusions that will be at variance to realities back home. So that was just us telling them that we are entirely in support of their proposition. No to carbon market, no to fossil fuel expansion. We want oil to remain in the ground, and we want, cut of emission even at source, because Africa, like you rightly agree with me, bears the biggest brunt, and of course, the same region contributes less than 4% of global emission. So when you see this fossil fuel, expanding interest that will keep them in business, I mean, it's not going to go well with us. And that was exactly what we demonstrated in that protest.
Okay, so what climate change discussions were being held? What were the topics centered around?
Well, quite a number. There is, quite interestingly, the first day of COP, you see a quick decision made on the loss and damage fund. Opinions are divided on this. Some said it is a win for us in the global south. Some are of the opinion that we have to talk about the operationalization. So that's a topic on its own. And also there's an ongoing topic on climate finance, global stocktake, and of course attempts to decarbonize and cut carbon emissions. So opinions are divided on all these topics, and then we are expecting to have a real out of the conclusions from this COP maybe tomorrow as we close the conversation here. So it depends on what you are monitoring. Quite a number of subjects are being discussed, but for us in the global south, we are really interested in decarbonization attempts and cutting down emission at source, like I did rightly mention. So, and also on the loss and damage fund, because historically infractions are being made and people have to be responsible for these infractions. But unfortunately, those who are responsible for these infractions are also the ones deciding on what to be done. And that is why you see us, come out strongly to protest and make statements that are expected to put them in checks.
Okay, so speaking about carbon emissions, we understand there was opposition from OPEC members to the fossil fuel deal, where they're talking about phasing out fossil fuels. Now, what are the issues that are being involved in those lines of discussions?
Well, these are the people speaking with two from both sides of the mouth, so to say. The other day, the COP president said science has failed to justify how fossil fuel has contributed to global warming. And of course, you also see them, striking deals, that will keep them further in business and expand fossil fuel, across the world. So yes, you might see OPEC coming up with claims, but of course, that which concerns of Africa are not being attended to. And that is why we are bothered about these false solutions that have been proclaimed or advanced. And also because of what we things that are actually above our head. For instance, carbon offset. For instance, net zero. I'm sure Africans don't yet understand what these issues are, because it doesn't sit well with us. We rather want conversation to center around renewable energy options that we have in abundance in our shores, and not options that seems to keep these polluters and are in business at the expense of our communities and frontline of our environment and frontline communities. So yes, we might want to give them a kudos for that statement created to OPEC, but the reality is that which is being propelled here is strongly against our interest back home in frontline communities from Africa and the global south.
Okay, so what is Africa's take home, and how much of our concerns are actually being heard?
So for Africa, we found this conference. Those of us who are here, had reached out to the African group of negotiators with a clear position detailing African society position for this COP. And in that particular position, we have, comments that were garnered from our experiences from frontline communities, how they intend to have the loss and damage operationalized. But we have not seen that commitment yet. It appears to us that the African group of negotiators and those that are deciding for Africa seems to have been completely bought. Quite unfortunate, but we can't conclude yet. We still hope that the ADL will look beyond the optics and then do that which is right for a continent that is unjustly, treated for an infraction that is not responsible for. Yeah, for Africa, the win for us will be, the full mechanism that will determine how loss and damage fund will be administered. And of course, to also have a say in solutions that will not advance carbon market. We want renewable energy options to be advanced in Africa, and then we also want our government to be more committed to, making internal statutory contributions or provision, to climate actions without appearing to be beggarly in global conversations such like this. Like this, and also have a common ground. Unfortunately, they are resting heavily on the provisions of the Nairobi Declaration, advancing immediate liquidity at the expense of historical liabilities, and that's why people like us are worried. But for Africa, those in the frontline communities in Nigeria, in Niger Delta, in Kambele, in Cameroon, in Taita Taveta, even in South Africa and Morocco, what justice will look like for them is a reduction, in the amount of flood that they experience, a sudden and of course a progressive decline in the upsurge in food prices, and a reduction in earthquake that we begin to see in other parts of Africa. That's climate justice for those who unfortunately don't have access to the mic, right here in Dubai.
Okay, so we didn't see much change between COP27 of last year, between that time frame of COP27 to COP28. Now that we're looking forward to make these changes, what actually needs to be done to effect these changes before we get to COP29 that would be taking place next year?
Community power. I think that's very important. Unfortunately, we are dealing with a government who seems not to be listening, but then we have to force a dialogue on them. We have gone past the era where government will make policies that will be totally disconnected to the realities of the frontline community. So before now and COP29, we will strongly advance community power and enforce dialogue on the government. This dialogue, of course, will detail recommendations from the frontline communities on how they want climate crisis to be addressed in their localities. There's a line that's missing in this conversation, and that's the line of local expertise. These people know how to, devise internal measure or local measure in adaptation and mitigation, but government is cutting them off the conversations that affect their livelihood. That affect their health, that affect their well-being, that threatens their survival and existence as a people. So between now and COP29, we expect government across the world to listen to the people that bears the brunt. Nobody can sit down in Abuja or in Cape Town or in Nairobi and make decisions for those of us who are in the frontline communities. Niger Delta is gone. The other day in Taita Taveta, the whole region is also gone. And then people are sitting in high places and high offices and making decisions just because they are resting on the suggestions given to them by foreigners and corporations who are also responsible for this crisis. So we want that dialogue to be enshrined between now and of course the next COP. And then more importantly, we also wish that government policies, particularly the NDCs, are truly nationally determined contributions, not foreign determined contributions or corporate determined contributions. When you look at African NDCs, you see languages that are alien to those who put the policies together. We want policies of government to strongly advance realities as frontline communities. So that's very important. And then lastly, we think the media needs to do more. Climate change is real, as against what some of us who are in the street might want to believe that it's mysterious, it's not real. No, it is real. But then there's need to, do mass orientation, and of course tell the people what they can do locally to adapt and mitigate. But more importantly, government must be seen to be proactive in mitigating some of this effect by committing for, like I said, and of course advancing the interest of the people, very strongly and passionately.
Okay. Well, Olamide, thank you so much for taking out time to have these discussions with us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Okay. So that was Olamide Martins, and he joins us from COP28, which was still taking place in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Well, he is the Programs Manager at Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. Well, over now to the conflict